This is Jenny. This is my last ever sprint video I'm making.
No, this is Suzy. And this is our end of quarter video. So I'll start off by talking about our problem and our motivations. So CAPI ran a study and finished writing a paper last quarter, but this raises the question of what to do next with this project. Start off, we haven't necessarily actually finished accomplishing the main goal, which was connecting people. And we want to open up the new space of opportunistic interactions. So our main research question that we tried to tackle this quarter is that now that we have this concept of opportunistic collective experiences, what should we do next? What should we do with these experiences? Where should we take them? We did a status update this quarter, and our main takeaways were that, first of all, a lot of the participants didn't believe that the practical problems and motivations we gave them were actual real problems. A lot of them thought that they were already connecting people that they actually cared about, and they didn't really want to connect with other people or have an app force them to connect with other people. And there were some people who thought an app doing certain things would be a bit intrusive, especially if they don't actually want to connect with certain people. So the main takeaway was that we need to think of clear personas and design for those specific users instead of having this general idea of users who just want to connect. As an example that Jenny gave is that she wants to connect with her little brother but doesn't have anything to talk about with him without some kind of shared context. We also tackled some tech stuff, fixed the architecture bugs, so now needs and experiences can fail.
Oh, ready?
Yeah.
User monitor, opportunistic coordinator, OC manager.
Woo!
OC manager, user monitor, opportunistic coordinator. Woo!
Very explicitly clear what is what in the code base. Was not like that when I first joined.
Then we even call them strategizer, progressor helper.
Yeah, I even went over that code base with someone during peer research, and they said it was pretty clear what matched with what in the architecture diagrams. So.
Cool. So next, we didn't really run a study this quarter, but we had Gino and Sanfeng trying to use our API, so that gave us a lot of insights into what it would be like for real developers to be using our API. So in terms of what worked, I was actually impressed at how many things you could write with our API. There were lots of hacky ways to figure out how to do things, and the CNN team did manage to write their experience in the end. Despite all their struggles, we did provide the functionality that they needed, so that was awesome. And it was also reasonably easy to track down bugs. They would message me via Slack, blah 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 is happening, and it was reasonably easy to say these are the files you should check, and these are the kind of things you should make sure are happening. In terms of what didn't work, it was super confusing to map their conceptual idea of the experience to the API, and they really needed a lot of explaining of how to go from a conceptual idea and how to represent that in the API, especially the ideas that have more hacks in the API. It really took us knowing the API so detailed to be able to explain, so that wouldn't work at all if we were trying to make the API available to other people. There's also no guide to modify our code base, and we really needed a lot better documentation, and that's something that Capel and Ryan are also really asking for. Keeping track of a single user participant as they progress through the experience. You can do it, but it's super hacky. So kind of thinking about how can we make it less hacky to keep track of them, but also not wasting points doing something when we can already learn what we need to learn in a really hacky way. And then lastly, it was sometimes unclear how different things should be abstracted for the more complicated experiences. For example, Gino and Sanfeng would ask oh, should this be a new experience? Should it just be a new need? At what point is something a new experience? At what point should something go in a callback versus should it just be an existing need and then the callback triggers it? So kind of when there was multiple different ways to potentially make something happen, what is the best abstraction to use in the API? And in terms of like why I think this was so hard for Juno and Sanfeng to use our API is they're like purposely trying to push the bounds of the API. So kind of thinking about, I think we'd have much different feedback if developers were trying to write things that our API was meant to do. So what to do next? So we are putting together a future directions document that we're working on, and so we're kind of thinking about some different places our API could go next, the motivation, approach, experience ideas, and kind of like a guide to like how you would technically approach that, estimating to hand off to whoever joins our project next. So kind of we tried to group them, and one of the groupings we found was like how can we support experiences running to completion, like given all the real world constraints and real world users, and also kind of along with that, like how can we ensure our users are actually able to participate in OCs and are actually kind of getting these notifications. In our study, a big problem was that story time didn't progress. We thought the situations were as vague as we could make them, but it was still really hard for users to trigger them and to get users to go to all those locations frequently enough. Part of that, yes, was that like we have college students, which are a terrible user group for us. But like certain scavenger hunt items were never found because no one ever went there. So technically, like most of our scavenger hunts never finished. And all like the easy needs that were things like sunny day were completed right away and frequently by some of the same users. So we had users who never participated just because they weren't getting those notifications because they weren't going to those places. And so in terms of user ability to participate, it wasn't distributed across all of our users. It was kind of focused in some users who were just getting the notifications first. So in terms of thinking about some of the ideas in order to make it so, you know, some of the motivation is like if we're trying to say we're going to open up this space, if all the experiences that we put into this space aren't running and users aren't actually getting notifications to participate, like there's no point. And so kind of building on tech feasibility and making the space possible, we need these experiences to be able to successfully run and successfully get user participation. So some things we could do would be like catch exceptions. So imagine if you could kind of like write story time, but have these exceptions where if users aren't participating, we could generalize the situation and kind of change it. So when things go wrong, we can literally change the experience to try to encourage the experience to get participants. Also writing in global constraints. So how can we talk about what we want to have happen more general? If we wrote story time as in we need someone from California, we need someone from Colorado, we need someone from Illinois, and someone from New York, that's a lot harder to get to complete instead of if we just wrote more generally, we need people scattered across the US to participate. We're much more likely to find people more randomly scattered. Next is like having some sort of compiler, so when you're writing these experiences, can you get feedback on if this is likely to run, what parts aren't likely to work, and so that way the developers are aware of how feasible their experience is before they put it out there. And then lastly, a smarter pinging algorithm. If you think about, say we have a user who always wakes up and goes to Coffee Lab, they will always get their coffee experience first in the middle of the day. So if they go to the gym right after Coffee Lab, they're not going to ever get the gym experience because they're always getting the Coffee Lab experience. And similarly, then all our users who go to Coffee Lab at 9 a.m. are getting the coffee experiences, and the 10 a.m. users who show up at the Coffee Lab aren't going to get those. So kind of how can we think about a smarter pinging algorithm that maximizes different users getting to participate in experiences and also maximizing the different contributions that users make back. Yeah. So those are just some of our thoughts. Hope you have a good flight, Hao-Chi, because you're probably watching this in the airport.
Bye, Hao-Chi.
Bye.